Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Summer Nutrition Landscape, setting the scene for summer 2026, hosted by the Food Research and Action Center. I'm Steve Hayward, FRAC's Communications Manager. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few brief housekeeping items. We expect this webinar to run about 60 minutes. We are recording the presentation and will send the recording and slides in a follow-up email. Closed captioning is available. To turn captions on, click the Show CC button in the bottom taskbar and select English as the spoken language. At the end of the presentation, we'll have time for questions and answers. To ask a question at any time, please use the Q&A tab, also in the bottom taskbar. With that, I'll pass it off to Clarissa Hayes, Deputy Director of Child Nutrition Programs and Policy at FRAC. Take it away, Clarissa.
Amazing. Thank you, Steve, so much. And hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I don't know where you are in the country, but it is finally starting to thaw out a little bit here in DC after all the snow we got. So it's the perfect time to start talking about summer meals, including planning and preparing for increased summer meals access. So I'm very excited about today's conversation. I am getting over a cold, so apologies if I sound awful, but we'll get through this together. Very excited that we have two of our favorite summer all-stars joining us to talk about their perspectives on summer meals. And then we're going to walk through where we stand with the programs, how we got to this point, and then we're going to dive into some best practices and things to think about as we move forward to summer. So let's go ahead and dive in. Thank you, Steve. So here's the agenda for today. I kind of just went over it, but again, we're going to start as always with just a quick look back at the history of summer nutrition programs because I think it's really important to see where we came from and where we're at now, including participation levels. Excuse me. And then I'm going to turn it over to our partners. So we have Stacy McDaniel from the YMCA of the USA joining us, who's going to talk from a national perspective about some of the things that her network are doing when it comes to summer meals and some of the best practices that they see. And then we also have Cody Bloomfield joining us from Hunger Solutions New York, one of our state partners, and they will be talking about the work that they're doing in New York because there's a lot of work to be doing on both the national, state, and local level when we think about expanding access to these programs. And then we definitely want to leave some time at the end for questions. And I know Steve already mentioned this, but just again, if you can, please use the Q&A feature that's on your screen and not the chat box because then we may lose your question. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So I always like to set the scene a little bit about what we know happens during the summer months because it really lays the groundwork for how important the summer nutrition programs are. So I'm sure many of you know, and the research is very clear, that summer can be a really hard time for kids from low income households. We know obviously that during the summer months, school is not in session, and that means that access to free and reduced price meals is paused. So what we see is food insecurity really rises during this time when access to school meals ends. And that, again, is why the summer nutrition programs can play such a key role. We also know that during the summer months, kids are more vulnerable to unhealthy weight gain, and summer learning loss hits hardest for students from low income communities. So again, just more evidence and more reasons for coming together to talk about the summer nutrition programs and some of the strategies that are out there to implement. So with this background and with this research of what we know happens during the summer months, we know that there's also some additional layers and considerations as we think ahead to the summer. So in July, Congress passed H.R. 1, or the Budget Reconciliation Bill, that made historic cuts to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. So you may be asking, Clarissa, why are we talking about SNAP on a webinar about summer meals? And we wanted to make sure to touch on this because this is going to trickle into the other child nutrition programs. So again, although there were no direct cuts to any of the child nutrition programs, there were cuts to SNAP, which are going to impact other programs. And how this is going to look is that how eligibility works for summer meals is that families are getting SNAP. That means that those children in those households are directly certified for free or reduced price meals, and that data is used to inform area eligibility and to make areas eligible to participate in summer meals. So we know that there's a clear path between those programs. And the other thing that I want to lift up, obviously, is as families are losing their SNAP benefits and being pushed off the program, programs like summer meals and summer EBT are going to become even more important when we think about filling the summer nutrition gap. So just wanted to start with a little bit of that lens before we move forward. So on the next slide, I wanted to just share a very quick look at summer nutrition access because while the program has been around for a long time, it has started to evolve quite a bit, and we've seen a lot of movement and changes in the last, I would say, 10 years or so. So let's take a quick historical tour. So we know that in 1968 is when the first iteration of a summer nutrition program began, and then it officially became the Summer Food Service Program in 1975. So moving forward, we had those programs, they were slightly changed, and then we got in 2009 some demonstration projects of summer EBT, which is really exciting. We also know that during 2020, which was during the pandemic, the summer nutrition programs really had to step up. So during school closures, summer food actually became the program that schools were operating for the first year of the pandemic. So that was the program in play. And then we also know that during the summer months, when kids were not going to sites in the same way that they used to, there were options around non-congregate and allowing families to take meals home from a site and eat them at home rather than at the physical location. So moving on, 2023, with the Annual Appropriations Act, we actually got, for the first time ever, a permanent summer EBT program, as well as rural non-congregate being made an official program option for summer food. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later. So that rolled out. And then starting from 2024, we have 3 programs that are available to fill the summer nutrition gap. So when we say the summer nutrition programs, we are talking about 3 program options: traditional summer food, rural non-congregate, and summer EBT. And Steve, if you want to go to the next slide. I think this is really important to lay out because when we think about summer meals access and again, filling the nutrition gap during when school is out, it really does take these 3 program options to fully meet the need. And moving forward, there's really work to be done on all of these program options. So we do have a lovely animation here, Steve, if you want to go ahead to all of them. So we really see all 3 of these working together. Again, traditional summer meals, summer EBT, and rural non-congregate. So that's kind of the lens that we're using as we move forward. So with that said, before we hear from our guest speakers, I do want to talk a little bit about just the programs. If you are new to summer meals, there are many resources out there for the ins and outs and a really deep 101, but we just wanted to start with setting the scene for what these programs are and current participation levels, and then we'll dig into some more of the best practices and strategies. So next slide, please. All right, so let's go ahead and just start with the summer meals basics. So when we think about traditional summer meals that you may be familiar with, there are 2 options that providers can use to serve these meals. And that's the Summer Food Service Program, which is open more broadly to providers. And then there's the Seamless Summer option, which is only available to schools and is really an extension of the National School Lunch Program. It's an easier admin lift for schools, but they do receive a lower reimbursement. So again, they can use summer food or Seamless Summer option. So these are the programs that exist to fill the gap and are at traditional congregate meal sites. And how this works is that a location or a site that has been deemed eligible can serve up to 2 meals per day in most cases, in certain combinations, breakfast, lunch, and snack, and then supper is also available. So up to 2 meals per day in most cases. And then as far as eligibility goes for these programs, sites can be either area eligible or they can individually qualify. So generally what this means, without going too far in the weeds, is that sites have to be located in an area where at least 50% of the children are eligible for free or reduced price meals through school data or through census data. And we'll talk a little bit more about census data later on in the presentation. So, like the other federal child nutrition programs, anyone who is participating in the summer meals programs does have to follow USDA's meal pattern. So, there are certain requirements around the type of components that have to be served in order to have a meal reimbursed. And then, when we're talking about this program specifically, these meals do need to be eaten on site. So, again, in that congregate model, unless they are participating in the rural non-congregate option, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So next slide, please. So just a simple take on how this looks. I think this visual is really helpful, again, if you are new to summer meals. So these programs are funded on the federal level by USDA, and by Congress. So they're appropriated funds, and then USDA is then sending funds to a state agency in every state. So it's usually the Department of Education, but it can look slightly different depending on your state. And these are the agencies that are administering the program. So they're providing the training, they're answering questions, they're acting as an in-between to USDA and getting those questions answered, and they're providing support to sponsors. So sponsors are the entities like food banks and YMCAs and schools who are taking on the work of running these programs and operating these programs, which means that they are securing the food, they're identifying sites, they're doing the paperwork, they're getting trained by the state, and they are receiving the reimbursement. So from there, sites are the physical locations where children are gathering to consume the meals. And then obviously at the end of the day, the children are the ones in every community who are benefiting from these program. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk briefly about the non-congregate and rural areas because like we mentioned just a couple slides ago, this is a relatively new program option. Non-congregate was broadly available during the pandemic. We know that this is such a critical component for filling the gaps in rural areas, which have been historically under utilized by summer meals participation. So as far as the overall program goes, it looks very similar to the traditional summer meals model that we talked about earlier. The thing to remember here is that this does have to be located in a low-income area, and then it has to be considered rural, and it also has to be without access to a congregate site. So the idea is that this would not replace traditional summer meals, but act as a complement and fill those gaps in rural areas where they don't have access to those traditional summer meal sites. So state agencies every year take a look at their communities and at their state, and they identify and target areas that don't have access to traditional summer meals and really amplify those areas and target their non-congregate efforts in those areas. So I would say before you do any planning or move forward with any non-congregate work, definitely check in with your state agency to see what their plans are and what infrastructure they have for rural non-congregate. Next slide, please. And then the last thing that I'll mention here on non-congregate is that there are different service delivery models. And the great thing about this program option is that it's not a one-size-fits-all. You can see here the three main options within rural non-congregate. So you can do multi-day meal distribution, which is pretty straightforward, but sites are able to distribute unitized meals for up to 10 calendar days at a time. There's also an ability to do some bulk meal distribution. For example, some sites are giving out gallons of milk instead of unitized milk, and this can be up to 5 days. And then the other and last component of this is home delivery. So instead of having families come to a site and get their meals and then go home, there are some schools and some other providers that are actually able to do home delivery and just bring the meals right to the families. The thing I would flag here is that there does have to be prior consent before this can happen, and usually it is targeted more for schools to do this. Next slide, please. So one tool that I wanted to mention, and we'll make sure that this goes out in the follow-up, is that USDA has over the last couple years expanded what rural non-congregate is and what is considered a rural area and have different criteria. So if you are not yet familiar with this map, this is USDA's map for determining rural areas. So if you want to scan that QR code or check out that link, you can go see what your state looks like and what areas could be potentially eligible to participate in rural non-congregate. Next slide, please. So, with all that said, where are we with summer food? So, we know that there has been a rollout of different options like the rural non-congregate. And I just wanted to share a quick look over time, and this is data from USDA of average daily participation in summer food. So, as you can tell, in the 70s, we had a pretty sharp increase in this program. And then we did have a leveling out. And we've had slow and steady growth in this program. And I want to flag, there's that dip around 2022, and that is after the pandemic. So there were a lot of program waivers that were in place during the pandemic that allowed for meal participation to continue. Those waivers went away. We had that drop, but we are starting to see a rebound here, especially with rural non-congregate. And we assume that that will continue to grow. So wanted to show that snapshot. And then the next slide is just a look at a resource that we have at FRAC. So every year we do a annual report on participation in the summer food or summer nutrition programs. And this is really helpful tool because you can take a look at your state and you can see how well your state is doing against like the national average, and you can look at site drop, and it's a year by year comparison. So we're a little delayed in our report this year, but it will be coming out soon, and we continue to see the participation, like I mentioned, rebound slightly since the pandemic. We are up to pre-pandemic levels with just over 3 million children receiving a meal or lunch on an average day, which is great. But we're still, right around that, reaching one kid with a summer lunch for every 6 that get a school lunch. So although there's been amazing progress and we're starting to see some expansion happen, we know there's so much more room to grow these programs. And then before I turn it over to our partners, I just want to touch briefly on summer EBT. We're not talking too much about this program on today's webinar, but as we talk about the summer nutrition safety net, I think we need to also acknowledge summer EBT and how great of a program this is. So on the next slide, we'll touch briefly on where we're at with this program. And if you aren't familiar with it, basically how it works is that summer EBT is a program that provides $120 per summer per eligible child during the summer months when school is out. So families get a EBT card with benefits on it that they can use at the grocery store. The thing I'll flag here is that not every state is participating, which we'll get into a little bit more on the next slide. And to be eligible, a child has to be receiving free or reduced price meals during the school year. And this program is amazing because research is already showing that this is reducing food insecurity and supporting nutrition. It's giving benefits to families so that they can buy the food that they need at the time and place that makes sense for them. And it really helps to work around some like those rural issues or access issues with summer meal sites. So this is an amazing program. We're hoping to get every state participating in it. And on the next slide, you can see where we're at for this upcoming summer. So yellow are states that are participating. Gray are states that are not participating. I know Oklahoma's a little different. Oklahoma as a state is not participating, but they do have Indian tribal organizations that are covering most of Oklahoma. So, we've had some pretty great success here with summer EBT take up. We have 38 states that are participating, along with DC, 5 Indian tribal organizations, and all of the territories. Iowa will be new for this upcoming summer, which is really exciting. And really the hope is that these states in gray will come onto the program. The thing that I will mention here with summer EBT is that states do have to cover 50% of the administrative cost of running the program. So it will take some additional advocacy and work to get these states participating. So that is summer EBT. Next slide, please. So I think that is it for me. I wanted to just kind of lay the groundwork of where we are at with the programs when it comes to participation and the program models. And I think it's really important to hear what is working and what folks are hearing on the ground. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to one of FRAC's longtime partners, Stacy McDaniel at the YMCA, to share more about what she is seeing from her network when they yeah, think about summer meals. So Stacy, floor is yours.
Clarissa, thank you so much. I'm excited to be with you all today. We seafood continue to be so important at the YMCA, especially during the summertime. I think that gap that Clarissa showed earlier of only 3 million kids having access to summer meals when we know 30 million rely on the school's free and reduced lunch just is a call to action for all of us. So let's take a look. I'd love to just share with you a little bit more about the YMCA as a whole. So it's the numbers, right? And you'll notice we are using FRAX gaps, but we know that there is such an opportunity when we say 1 in 5 kids may not receive a meal today, that there's a huge opportunity in our communities to be able to meet that need, especially during out of school time. And I've got this map here, and those purple dots are actually YMCA's that are offering meal programs. You'll notice it gets a little sparse in the middle over there, but that's because the associations are a little more sparse in that area. So kind of fits where the populations are. We know that YMCA's represent almost 10,000 communities across the country. They're trusted providers and community resources. And so there's a huge opportunity to really be able to springboard and use that infrastructure to make sure that kids have continuous access to healthy meals all year round. But let's talk about the summer in particular. Next slide. So, altogether, the Y's are one of the largest nonprofit providers of meals and snacks to kids and teens in the U.S. Last year, we served about 57 million meals across 6,000 communities. And then our Ys do that through early childhood programs, after school programs, summer programs, but even beyond our walls with mobile distributions. And then we really found ourselves in 2020 expanding that even more broadly to those broader food access efforts in partnerships with our food bank partners and others, and adding pantries on site, adding markets, and food, and really partnering up for food distributions as well to be that last mile connection point. We know that when you come into a Y, it could be for a variety of reasons. No one really knows why. And so that provides a really safe space for folks to access what they need to be able to thrive in their communities. Now, for our children's meal programs, those are all really made sustainable through CACFP and SFSP. It allows us to provide those meals to children and partners for years to come, right? And we do that by being our own sponsors, but also depending on what's in the community, we might be sites under someone else's sponsorship. So really flexible there, but ultimately wanting to make sure that those children's meals are tied to that source of reimbursement for financial viability and ensuring we can keep meals going for years to come to kids. So, what does that look like? Well, the first is what you traditionally think of summer camp. We have tons of kids coming into YMCA camps. They're enjoying the day with us. We're going to serve them a healthy breakfast and lunch. Or a lunch and snack to all those campers. We have a captive audience, and rather than asking parents to pack lunch, and who knows what that's going to look like, we can make sure that every kid comes and has access to a healthy meal. For kids that don't have full pantries, they're going to have a robust, filling, nutritious meals. And, we find that this even helps parents, right, who are struggling to pack healthy foods. It levels the playing field so everybody's eating those healthy foods in those camp. And everybody has a full lunch and a full breakfast that they can rely on. But I really love the heart of this because that is pretty much expected, right? That's a very low-hanging fruit for a YMCA. We really love these outreach sites as well, and that's when we're taking those meals beyond our walls and serving those open sites where any kid can walk up. We're partnering up with libraries, housing authority complexes, community centers, parks, churches. Anywhere a large population of kids who need the meals could walk up and receive those. And being smart about it too. Where are kids already congregating in the summer that we could support with those meals as these meals providers? It's a huge opportunity for all of us in this work to really think, how can we strengthen and shore up that nutrition support across our communities, not just within our walls, but to serve all the families and fill those gaps of where the kids who need them are, but maybe aren't able to get them. So that goes hand in hand with those mobile meal programs. We have Y on the Fly. You can see those lovely buses there, but this really works well too for us. We can take that same staff and go from stop to stop, providing activities and enrichment, and then the meals, all in the same with that same staff to hit multiple pockets of children throughout the community to increase that access. Whether they have transportation or not, we'll just come to you. We'll bring that Y on the Fly and make sure that kids have good, nutritious food and fun over the summer. So don't forget about weekends. You can use SFSP during that time too. We do have programs on the weekends. And so it's nice to just shore those up with those meals. A lot of times it's not the same staff. It's different staff who are working those, but we're able to incorporate it in and make that happen. And then, of course, Clarissa mentioned rural non-congregate, but man, that weekly meal bundle of to-go breakfast and lunch in rural areas expands our reach for so many families. And I'm going to delve a little deeper into that in a moment, but that is such a growing opportunity for us to make sure that the rest of those millions of kids who need those meals have a better odds of getting them. So let's dig in a little bit deeper. I'm going to bring some of these pieces to life a little more fully for you in the next slides. So we love this Y without walls, right? That open site, any kid can walk up. The beauty of this is there's no registration, right? That kids can come up. It feels safe, it's inviting, and it removes that barrier of having the access to a facility, transportation to get there. It just goes straight to you. And then, of course, it also expands your reach as well. So, really expanding community impact that's happening when we think just a little bigger. What more could we do, and how many more kids could we reach if we don't expect them to come to us? We don't build it and they will come, but we just go right to them. So, you can see on this next slide that we are going right out into areas where there's large populations of kids. And you'll see public pools, great opportunity to get those meals out, parks, libraries, campuses, playgrounds, housing authority complexes. You can see here all of the fun lined up. So you've got meals going on, but then there's also this festive atmosphere that families want to be part of, kids want to join, really making this feel like it's an exciting event too, so that kids are coming and they're getting those healthy meals and it feels like a fun activity more than a free meal, right? And really just prioritizing where are the kids that we can easily provide them the meals with so that they can easily get and safely get to that meal site. And partnering up, who's already trusted in that relationship that we could pair up with. I mentioned those weekend meals, a lot of basketball courts, right? Can we take meals on Saturdays and Sundays to basketball courts where kids are already hanging out? But then also, we know that when you're offering the fun activities, it just boosts participation and consistency and makes kids and families want to be part of it. So on the next slide, you can see here those mobile meal programs. And I want you to note, right, it looks a variety of ways all across the country. We've got retrofitted school buses, we've got vans. There's a Subaru hatchback in there somewhere as well. But what does that look like in your community? And how might you get support to make that possible? This really does just increase your reach and effectiveness of utilizing your staff, right? You can get out into so many more locations. I was talking to the Kingsport YMCA yesterday in Tennessee, and they go to 11 apartment complexes, but they're doing it through this mobile concept where they're going. Their team stays for an hour and engages with families and play right in all games, getting kids active, and they're really providing a variety of meals. They wanted a diverse menu, they wanted healthy options, but they also have opportunities to do taste testing, right? But it's about that dignified experience that they're bringing in this food, and it's never just the food. They talked about building trust and relationship. It's not just the body that needs nourishing, but we want to provide opportunities for healthy living all the way around and providing those services and relationships consistently all summer long, that they know they can count on you at that set time to get that meal and to engage and to have that fun, safe space to be part of. So let's go ahead and look on this next slide. I'm really excited. You know, we saw rural non-congregate coming out in the pandemic, and when it was made permanent, chef's kiss. I can't get more excited about a program that we have the opportunity. And now it's our opportunity to build upon that. How are we robustly utilizing this option to better serve rural America? We know that rural communities just have so many unique challenges. It's not easy. It's not always possible to have a place where kids can just walk up, as we were talking about earlier. It's very scattered. It may be miles away. There's not public transit. It's a food desert. Getting to the grocery store is extremely hard. Childcare is hard to come by over the summer. This rural non-congregate option has really expanded the reach of what we're able to do with the capacity. This Monroe Family YMCA it actually is partnering up with our local community college. They're centered right there in this rural community, and you'll see there's weekly bags of breakfast and lunch and milk headed out the door that families can get for their families. And we've just seen this be so well received in communities to be able to really get to pockets that there's so many limited food options and it's just so hard. So you'll see on this next slide. I'm hoping. All right. This was one of the ones that got edited a little bit. I'm going to pop this video in here. Go ahead and click it so you'll have it when it's over. But there's a video of the YMCA of Southeast North Carolina. And I love this video so much because this YMCA is packing up these rural non-congregate boxes and they are setting up tents in the Family Dollar parking lot. If that's not brilliant, right? Where's the place in a rural community where everyone goes? Well, in that community in Wilmington, outside of Wilmington, North Carolina, it happens to be the Family Dollar. And we know in rural communities that is a thriving spot, right? They partnered up. Families come, they get these meal boxes, and they've got a testimonial in this video of a grandmother who has a house full. I think it was over 10 kids, right, that she's caring for over the summer on a fixed budget. And she talked about this helps her so much. This is how she feeds the kids over the summer. And she doesn't know what she would do without it. And man, for us to be able to intentionally support our communities in this way, and while she's there, she can use her SNAP dollars and grab what she needs from the Family Dollar. It's a win-win for our community members that need the support, for community partners that want to help in different ways. How can we think of more creative partnerships? So I love that story. If you get a chance to check out that video, it's heartening. And I hope it encourages you to say, oh man, I'm going to do rural non-congregate. This is my year. So let's take a look at what we see happening across different YMCAs across the country. This is Osage Prairie YMCA out in Nevada, Missouri. Before they started Rural Non-Congregate, they had a camp. It was under 100 kids, right? Because we're limited in how many kids can come to camp, right? Even if we scholarship everybody, transportation is limited. But when they took this rural non-congregate model, they actually partner up with a local grocery store who delivers the food on Saturdays. Volunteers pack it and then they distribute it. There's registration in advance, but it helped them grow across 2 rural counties to reach more than 2,400 kids that could get that weekly bundle of food for the week and have that nourishment all summer long. And what a brilliant way, right? That partnership with the local grocery store. Now, mind you, you're still meeting, it's all pre-cooked, right? There's no preparation required, but it's that weekly bundle of food for that whole family. And that's now going back into that community. You're engaging volunteers who are helping with this work. They're also contributing to your program. And you're just serving so many more children who couldn't be part of those more traditional options. So walk up as well. This is Rome Floyd County YMCA. I love this one. The YMCA actually loans out their childcare wagons, right? We've got early childcare, and the kids get gift bags when they bring them back. They've never lost a single wagon. But right, it's a week's worth of food, and sometimes if you don't have transportation, it's a little more difficult. So they use the wagons to get out back, and then they bring them back to their homes. The mobile route as well, you can see Memphis and Mid-South actually load up and they do multiple stops for weekly bundles. So they're again taking that option but applying it to rural non-congregate. And as Clarissa said, that direct home delivery really is a little more school focused. We don't see a lot of YMCAs doing this. The picture I have here is of the YMCA of Central Massachusetts. And this was during the COVID era, right? They had a partnership with their school who referred families that could not get out to those meal sites. And so they actually engaged volunteers. They put up a request and within an hour had over 100 volunteers willing to help deliver those meal boxes with those weekly bundles. And actually over 1 million meals were delivered in that first year through this partnership. So I'm excited to see what you can do across your networks, what more we can do to make sure that kids this summer who need these meals can actually access them. So, as always, happy to be a resource for you. I think my contact information is on the next slide. And I am happy to support and share and connect you with YMCAs. We love good partners and working together to make sure more kids have food. So thank you so much, Clarissa.
Thank you, Stacy, so much. I see some questions coming through, so we'll get to those as we go along. And at this point, I think we'll go ahead and turn it over to Cody.
Thanks, Clarissa. I appreciate it. I'm so grateful to be with y'all today. My name is Cody Bloomfield, and I'm the summer nutrition specialist at Hunger Solutions New York. Next slide. So Hunger Solutions New York is a statewide nonprofit focusing on outreach and advocacy for the federal nutrition programs, including SNAP, WIC, and the child nutrition programs that are listed here. As a summer nutrition specialist, I work explicitly on summer meals and summer EBT, and I do want to acknowledge that the ability to focus in on these programs really allows me the capacity to build some of the infrastructure that I'll be talking about today. And I just want to start too by quickly giving some context on New York specifically. So we know that 1 in 7 New Yorkers struggles with food insecurity, including nearly 1 in 5 children. And we've seen the demand across New York's network of food banks really increase more than 70% compared to pre-pandemic levels, with use continuing to increase year over year. Next slide. So while we know that summer meals provides a critical source of nutrition while school is out of session, only 1 in 4 kids eligible for free and reduced price lunches ate a summer lunch in 2024. And there is stronger participation in New York City, so that really drives our statewide average. So kids outside of the city actually participate even less. And I'll talk a little bit more as I go on about how rural non-congregate is starting to address that. And overall, we're taking a multi-pronged approach to increase participation across the state. Next slide. So we've been really intentional about where we're putting our energy and our time, and the size of New York has really determined what's been needed. So we have about 2.7 million students and a large territory to cover. So smaller states may not need the exact same blueprint as what we use in New York. When I came into my position, I was lucky to step into some really long established relationships with state agencies, existing regional collaboratives, and partners from across the state. So the statewide work group seemed like a really natural way to leverage these relationships and coalesce statewide leaders. And I'll get into more detail about the work group shortly. Another area that's working well is the cross promotion of the summer nutrition programs, and I'm really glad that Clarissa's already kind of teed me up for this. We're really dedicated to talking about summer meals and summer EBT together whenever possible, since the programs were intended to work together to more fully address summertime food insecurity. It just makes really good sense to weave them together. And I'll share some images of outreach resources later just to show you what I'm talking about. And then rural non-congregate, our operations continue to increase in New York State year after year. And the administering state agency, which is our state education department in New York, has done a really great job building the flexibility in a sustainable way. So we've got some things that are working really well for us, and we've also got some opportunities that we're considering. So the inclusion of funding for universal school meals in New York and the fiscal year 2026 budget and the years of work that went into that effort made very clear the importance of feeding our kids while they're at school. And then it also subsequently created the opportunity to recognize what exists in terms of summertime food insecurity as those kids lose access to free school meals when school ends. And there is a new focus on combating summer hunger at the state level. In her State of the State address, New York State Governor Kathy Hochul talked about both expanding rural non-congregate summer meal operations and encouraging cross-agency collaborations when it comes to summer EBT. So we're really excited to build on this momentum. And then in a similar vein, I think seizing this like summer EBT moment is also really important too. Summer EBT is a new program and it's drawing media attention, especially like Clarissa was talking about, where there are states that are opting out of the program. So I'm just doubling down again on this idea of tying the two programs together and seeing that the spotlight on summer EBT is also an opportunity to talk about summer meals. The lack of awareness of summer meals is typically the biggest barrier to participation. So breaking down the silos of these programs and then lifting them up simultaneously feels very well worth the effort. Next slide, please. So we launched our statewide work group last June, and we meet quarterly with the goal of increasing program access and strengthening summertime food security. And the work group consists of school nutrition directors. Thank you. The work group consists of school nutrition directors, school dietitians, partners from other statewide organizations, libraries, and other CBOs or community-based organizations, food banks, and then leaders of our regional collaboratives. So we offer timely updates to these folks that are specific to New York State. So for example, around summer meals, we just reviewed USDA's new rural designation mapper and the capacity builder at our last meeting. And then when we talk about summer EBT, we typically are talking about the timing of benefit issuances and expungement, and then card security features that would be worth pushing out into the community. And we also share outreach resources during these meetings. And the meetings are like a sort of focus group. They really allow the space for top concerns, common questions, and best practices to filter through. The group is still very much in its infancy, but we've had consistent attendance, and it's already really clear that this group will be a useful tool in terms of identifying and tackling gaps in understanding and then increasing program participation. And Hunger Solutions New York facilitates other statewide work groups. And because of our networks, we're just really well positioned to bring folks together from across the state. And also because of our existing relationships with state agencies, we can elevate like the top questions and concerns to the appropriate state agency staff. Next slide. So I'm going to let's see where we are. Yes, next. There we go. Perfect. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. So I'm going to quickly run through the regional summer meals collaboratives of New York State. I just really want to highlight the amazing work that these folks are doing. So I'm starting here with the No Kid Hungry New York Rural Non-Congregate Working Group. And this is the newest group. They started in January 2025. They have about 12 sponsors that they're working with. And so the focus is quite small, right? They're just based in Western New York, and they're really rural non-congregate specific. So they're able to drill down on rural non-congregate best practices. Next slide. And this is just some more photos of some of their staff and some of their operations. Next slide. And then the next regional collaborative I'll focus here and spotlight on is the Summer Meals Partnership of Rochester. So this group started in 2013. They have around 12 organizations, but they have a citywide focus. So they're really focused on the city of Rochester in New York. And they're very intentional about filling gaps in meal site coverage. And we can go to the next slide, and you'll see a screenshot of their website. And this is where they've created their own meal site finder for the city. And the website also features a chat bot. So that's the blue and white pop-up on the right side of the screen there. And that just allows for another means of communication for families that have questions. So that's kind of how they're tackling this within Rochester City. Next slide. And then the last collaborative I'll just feature really quickly is the Summer Meals Collaborative of the Capital Region. Also started in 2013. They have around 30 organizations participating, and they operate across 8 counties. So this is a true regional focus. Next slide. And the Summer Meals Collaborative has some really unique things going on. So in the picture on the left, there's an individual wearing a blue shirt that says, "Ask me about free summer meals." And this person is part of their ambassador program. So these shirts went out this last summer to anyone who is interested in helping to spread the word about summer meals. And it's been a really effective avenue. You can go to summer meal sites, you know exactly who to ask if you have questions or concerns. And then people wear them out in the community too when summer meal sites aren't necessarily happening, so people can ask in the community and get more information. So it's a very interesting initiative that they've been piloting over this last summer. And then they also are very skilled at bringing in activity partners, I would say. I really want to highlight that as well. So they have a few art-focused organizations who don't necessarily have anything to do with the summer meals themselves, but they come and they partner with sites that are existing in order to bring activities to the program participants. Next slide, please. And before I get into kind of the meat of this slide, I will draw attention to the graphic on the right, which is one of the final products of the Summer Meals Collaborative of the Capital Region. And this one's really interesting because this was actually kids that were involved in the non-congregate meals. They were getting meals delivered to their house, and they were making art with a lot of the delivery material that the meals came in, taking pictures and sending it to that art activity partner. And then they created this really amazing mural at the end of the summer. So I think it's a really novel way of getting kids engaged in a more social emotional learning sense that are not necessarily even coming to congregate sites. So very cool. Had to point that out and give them some kudos. And then I'll just say lastly here on the slide, in December, I did facilitate a panel with all of these folks, so all the leaders of these collaboratives, and they really went into a lot of detail about their collaborative structures. The ultimate goal, the hope, was to encourage more regional collaboration in other areas across the state. And look, we all know these federal programs can be complicated, but these collaboratives hold a lot of institutional knowledge. And I've just seen time and time again how a new sponsor or an interested site can be onboarded in a really efficient way, thanks to the support of the collaborative versus, say, the time it would take for that individual to acquaint themselves with all the requirements on their own. And I think the lessons are fairly translatable in the webinar, so I've linked it at the bottom of the slide if folks want to check it out. Even though it's in New York, I think lessons can be translated across state lines. And on the slide are some of the lessons we distilled in New York, and many were lifted up by our state education department, who is the administering state agency for summer meals. And although some of them are quite simple, the basics are really important, and they can't be stressed enough. So next slide, please. And these are, I've mentioned them multiple times at this point, these are the cross-promotional materials that I've been referring to. We've got flyers, we've got graphics, we've got language that can be plugged into web pages, newsletters, social media, and it's in both English and Spanish. And it really ties both programs together, talks about both programs at the same time. And we use the statewide work group, we use the regional collaboratives to push out these resources. We also push it out to all of our other networks. And then we are grateful to, of course, for our relationship with our administering state agency because they've also shared these materials on their website, which just helps us in terms of building trust with sponsors across the state. And then the other resource that's linked on this page, and I'll just talk about it briefly, it has to do with summer EBT. So we've created more information, an actual just page dedicated to helping schools connect more kids to summer EBT and understand their role in that. We're very excited about this. This is very new. And in New York, our SNAP agency administers summer EBT. So we worked with them specifically to hone in on these tips for success. And I won't talk much more about it today because it's more summer meals focused, but feel welcome to check that link out. And then next slide, please. Perfect. So I mentioned earlier that our summer meals administering state agency, which is the state education department, has been working to really sustainably scale this new flexibility. And I'm just so delighted to share these numbers. Meals served have more than doubled every year since we started operating rural and congregate in 2023. And I'm just excited to see what 2026 holds. And we, as the statewide organization, one of the statewide organizations in New York, will continue to support sponsors that are interested in the rural non-congregate flexibility. We'll keep lifting up best practices. And I think one best practice that I'd like to call out that has really emerged to the top is this concept of piloting rural non-congregate operations. So, for example, this might look like a sponsor offering rural non-congregate meals at just one site in order to get familiar with the process. And then another example of that is offering congregate meals most of the week, but then a grab and go rural non-congregate meal on Friday in order to provide kids with food for over the weekend. So like really like a wraparound service style. Next slide, please. Yeah, and I'll just wrap up by saying I'm really grateful for the opportunity to focus so explicitly on the summer nutrition programs and then contribute to greater time food security for the kids in New York State. And thank you again to FRAC for having me today. Please feel welcome to be in touch with any questions.
Amazing. Thank you, Cody, and thank you, Stacy. I feel like I learn so much every time I have these two on a webinar with me, and I agree. I feel like using the word pilot can do a lot. So awesome. Well, I know we have some questions coming in. I want to make sure we get to those, but I just wanted to throw out a couple of opportunities and things to think about over the next couple of months as we get closer to summer meals season. So Steve, if you want to cycle through, I think we have some lovely animations here. So if you are a partner, I would say now is the time to be checking in with the operators and sponsors in your state or area to see what their capacity is and whether they're looking to expand and to add sites. It's also, I know Cody mentioned data and how important that is. We want to take a look at the eligible areas in your state to see if there are some that could have participated but didn't. And is there an opportunity in those areas? Is there a school or a library or a Parks and Rec or a YMCA that's not participating that could come onto the program? Next. So if you haven't already, and if you're doing work on summer meals, it's a great time to connect with your state agency to learn about any updates that they have and their plan for summer meals expansion and support. I know I get a lot of state agency emails, and a lot are doing trainings, they're doing webinars on the program, so it's a really timely time to be doing that. Next bullet, please. If you are just here to help promote, that's so important as well. So including information in your newsletter and other sources of information that go out, and when you're talking to partners, just really amplifying the summer nutrition programs and how important they are. Next slide or next bullet. And then if you have also helped with outreach, now is the great time to look at what you did last year and what worked and what didn't work so well and really revamp those. And I always like to say, don't reinvent the wheel. There are plenty of outreach materials out there that can be adapted and used. I know that USDA has some, and many states also have their own materials that they have available for for you to use and update and share information about the sites that will be operating this summer. Next slide, please. And then, as always, just a quick plug. There probably won't be momentum on the federal level to change or improve the summer nutrition programs for a while. There's a lot of opportunity in the state. But ideally, if we were to make changes to the summer nutrition programs, there's a lot of opportunity around streamlining summer and after school meals. Lowering that area eligibility threshold from 50 to 40 could make more areas that need to be able to participate the chance to do so. Allowing summer sites to serve 3 meals, like I mentioned earlier, they can only do 2 for the most part right now, and we know that many kids are at sites or at programs for up to 8 hours, and it would be lovely for them to be able to serve 3 meals. And then even with rural non-congregate and summer EBT, we know that there are still some transportation challenges that many communities face. So allowing funding to help support and alleviate those would really be a game changer. So I think on the next slide, we have some time for questions. So I wanted to just touch on a few that came through and just reiterate those. So someone had a question about what are some of the barriers to summer EBT and why states may not be participating. So, at this point, like I mentioned earlier, cost can definitely be a reason for states not to participate. There are also some states that either do not have the capacity at their state agency or the technology is outdated to run summer EBT and just can't tackle that at the moment. And then lastly, unfortunately, for many of the non-participating states, there is just not the political will to opt into this program at the moment. With the assumption that maybe summer meals are covering all the need, there are some states that are choosing just not to participate because they don't agree with the program. So with that said, I will say there are advocates and partners in most states, doing the work and advocating. But if you are in one of the non-participating states and would like to learn more about opportunities to advance summer EBT, I would be more than happy to connect with you after today's webinar. And then the last thing I'll touch on as far as some questions I've seen come in, there was a question about rural non-congregate and whether the student had to be present to pick up the meals. So no, per regulations, students do not have to be present in order for families or someone to pick up the meals for them, but sponsors and sites have to have a system in place to ensure that there isn't duplication and that the meals are going to a child because this program is for kids 18 and under. So there are no firm guidelines for that. Sponsors really have to come up with their own plans and get them approved by the state. Some things that we see are, like a school would have a sign-up form or a QR code or similar ways like that where, it is tied to a school roster or some other system that would ensure that there isn't duplication happening. So again, it's a little different site by site and sponsor by sponsor. So it's not required, but there do need to be systems in place to alleviate any duplication of meals. And then there was a question about summer meals and sun meals. Yes, they are used interchangeably. Sun meals is a branding name that USDA developed a couple years ago, and it's really because once you have the 3 components, it gets a little confusing. So yes, sun meals and summer meals are the same. All right. Actually, this is kind of an interesting question. I'm curious, Cody, if you have any insight on what could be some responses to district administration if there's safety concerns around open sites. It looks like specifically around maybe the public coming in, if there's like a summer program happening, if there's limited staffing. Have you guys run into that at all in New York? And would you have any insight?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I've mostly seen that they have typically different sites. So they'll have like an open site for kids that are not in any kind of programming, and then they'll have a closed site for the kids that are, because it is challenging to keep track of which kids are participating in the programming and then these kids coming in from the outside. And that is so fair. It does create some safety concerns. So typically that's what we've seen happen, is that closed site and then a separate open site. In some cases, there's partnership with like a nearby community-based organization. So say like the library is handling the open site, the school actually isn't even handling the open site, but it's happening at the same time of day. It's also a lunch, for example. So I hope that helps.
That's awesome. Thank you. And then I think just in the interest of time, I think we've touched on most of these, but the last thing is someone bringing up that there are some limitations. For example, if a school is operating in a county or in an area that there may not be, other non-congregate sites allowed to operate. So the thing that I'll flag here is that, in order to operate, you do need to prove that there isn't access to other traditional sites or there aren't non-congregate sites that are serving the same area. And schools actually do get first right of refusal for areas. So if a school is in a community and they are serving everyone and they can prove that, then it is very likely that a state agency wouldn't allow another program to operate. And I think the key here is just, is that the case? Like, is it a potential that like some children are not being reached by the school? So to the person that asked that question, I would be happy to connect more about that. But it does get a little different state by state because states are actually making up, is it a geographic? Like, do you have to have 10 miles in between? Do you have to serve on different days? So there are a couple different layers and components that states can put in place to make sure that they're these programs are running with integrity and it's, it can be a little bit different, but happy to connect on that because I know it's a lot to dig into on the call. So if I did not get to your question, please feel free to follow up with me and would be happy to connect. I just want to quickly summarize and thank Stacy and Cody for joining us today and for everybody for making time. On the next slide, I believe we have some the upcoming we have some resources on frac.org. So if you're looking for more resources on summer meals expansion, we have reports and different guides and toolkits. And then on the next slide, we will be having additional webinars on summer meals. So we just crossed out this one, but we'll be talking about strong summer meal programs in March and then outreach that works, which is really an important topic when we think about summer meals expansion. So I think that's it from us, and we are at time. Thank you to our speakers, and thank you to all of you for joining, and we hope you can join us in March for our next webinar. So thank you all so much. All right, bye.